Hi, and welcome to the Higher Density Living Podcast, Alex. And we have a sponsor today. Who's our sponsor?
Tartle, TARTLE.co. What's your data worth?
And what are you talking about, like data? What do you mean?
What do I mean by data? Anything that you create, think, act, do, take pictures of, that all has value to it, and people are willing to purchase it. But you had to find some means to sell it, right?
Right.
So, what does Tartle do? Tartle gives you the ability to sell all that data that you create, what you think, what you take pictures of, everything you do online in your personal life, and start to get some sort of value for it.
So all that data that we're giving to all these companies, we could turn around and get paid for that?
Yeah, you get paid for it. So instead of just giving your stuff away for free, why not get paid for all those things that you create? Why give them all the value stream?
So how can our Higher Density Living listeners sign up?
Easy. You go to tartle.co, and there's a big green button on there, and you sign up. It's going to take you 30 seconds to do so, and once you're in, you're good to go.
And if you're having trouble with that, you can go to
The YouTube page?
Yeah, what's the YouTube page?
Oh, man, it doesn't have its own thingamajig. Like, unless you're like
URL or whatever. So
Yeah.
you have to go to YouTube and then just type in Tartle.
Type in Tartle.
Tartle.
Yeah, TARTLE, and we'll pop up.
And you have a walkthrough.
We have walkthrough videos on everything you need. We have explainers, philosophy, fundamentals, everything you need to know about the system so that you can start making some value for your data.
That's perfect. And we have another sponsor.
And who's our other sponsor, Jason?
It is my digital marketing company, Rigby Digital. We help medium-sized small businesses with digital marketing to be able to make sense with their Facebook ads, Snapchat ads, websites. We can make you a bomb website and it not cost the 10 grand that a lot of people are charging now.
I like the sound of that.
Website. So they're very beautiful websites. You can go to rigbydigital.com. So that's pretty basic.
No, I think that's really nice. And you've done some fantastic work. It's funny.
No. You always think of, when you think of digital, digity, because what do you do?
I play the didgeridoo.
Yes, I think a lot of people don't know that. And we will put some of your...
Ripping the didge. That's what I call
Are you a didgeridoo SoundCloud rapper?
No, but you want something?
That would sound cool, though, to have that in a rap.
That'd be kind of dope.
I wonder... somebody's had to have done that.
Yeah, they've been diging it up.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, when you rip the didge, you can't go back.
Really?
And once you start ripping
I have
didges...
no talent in music, though.
You could be a didge ripper.
I don't know. I think it would sound horrible.
Yeah.
I think all I would do is like make cats meow and dogs howl.
When you the didge, right?
Right.
It's funny because it's it's an elongated tube, so it sounds cool on the way out, but when it's going in, it sounds like flatulence coming out of your mouth. And then
So can you hear it?
I can hear it.
In it. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I can hear it, but my tone is on the other side of where the volume's coming out, right?
Right.
But I hear the vibration, I feel it, and it sounds like literally like someone's ripping ass. But it sounds beautiful on the other side. I'm like, ooh, this sounds so natural. But like, yeah, of course it's natural.
Well, I think that can be a metaphor to a lot of our lives.
What, ripping ass?
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. Oh, here we go. We have a show on love today. And here we talk about flatulence.
Yeah, it's not...
We just did a whole cow, don't eat meat, there's lots of flatulence.
I'm going to start asking people, you didn't rip ass, you ripped the didge?
Yeah, I think that's better. Huh?
Did you just didge rip? I mean, this is a public area.
Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, like, what you may think is not music, at the end of it, seems something that's beautiful. That's
really interesting. So that input, right? And then it goes through this entire journey, and then something phenomenal comes out the other side. Sounds like everything. Like,
you ruined the podcast.
What I eat.
Oh, this is hilarious.
That's great.
Yeah.
The books I read.
Yeah, vegan farts smell amazing.
No smell.
Yeah, no smell. It's the... oh, this is horrific. I cannot believe that we hit this subject.
I don't even know why we're still talking about it.
And both of us are kind of not into that at all.
No.
Like, I'm anti...
Like,
I'm like very gentlemanly with that.
I don't...
it's like a separate... private part of my life.
You've talked to Amanda?
Anybody?
You've talked to Amanda?
Yeah,
you know how I am with it,
yeah,
you know?
And we're both that way, and here we are talking about it.
Yeah, but I think this is...
On mics, nationwide.
Is this how we get over it?
Yeah, I don't know. International, too.
We have some attachment
we're
to
on
being...
Deezer.
Yeah, we're on Deezer. The Germans, I don't know how they take to this.
We can become #1 in Germany, our podcast. That would be like a dream.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch.
Yeah, if I could come over there and We go to all these different.
You just go to get a bratwurst, a vegan one.
Oh yeah, or go to a soccer
and then they're
game,
like,
yeah.
I was gonna do a terrible German accent, but I'm not gonna do it.
No, we always associate it with the bad part.
Yeah, the bad part. So
there is a bad part. Let's talk about that real quick.
what you want to?
Because I want to talk about things that appear to be bad.
Oh.
Because we're going to talk about attachment today.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So we usually attach to things that we judge whether they're bad or good.
Yeah, how you perceive
But really,
the world.
there's nothing bad or good.
No, so bad or good's a human concept, right? It's just our way of looking at the world and trying to put things into boxes so that we can reconcile the actions and events that happen around us. So, if you look at historical figures, right? You might be like, oh, that's a bad person.
Right.
Well, it's not the fact that the person is bad. What they are is they are just a stronger energy of some of the darker parts of you that happen inside of you, right?
Right.
But what they're doing in their physicality, in their world, they exuberate all of this energy, this rather negative energy. It's not bad, right? But it's a polarization of forces here. So you have all this positive stuff like a giant battery, right? If the universe is like one big battery, it wants to be in equilibrium, like your body, like nature, like everything else. So if you have all this good that's going on, right, you're going to find that there's someone who's going to look disproportionately bad, and it's going to be typically one historical figure, right? Or multiple over a period of time. But you notice that it's not 30 extremely negative historical figures all at once.
Right.
Because that energy would be out of balance.
Right.
Yeah,
you wouldn't want.
No, it'd be.
No, I mean, like 30 really. And you can see that. You can see it happen. For every one dictator,
Yeah.
we have, 10 amazing, leaders.
Exactly, right? So and it's not, people are going to focus on the numbers of 10 to 1. Don't look at the ratio. We're looking at the output of energy that is actually happening, right? So if people are doing disproportionately negative energy, right, to counteract all this positive based energy you have on the other side, you might have to have 10 people doing good stuff just to counteract the one bad thing or the amount of energy happening from one bad person.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think people perceive the whole aspect of understanding that you need both.
You have to have both, right? Because think about how out of whack everything would be.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you think of a utopia is not just all good. A utopia is perfect balance. A utopia is understanding of both sides and that energy.
Right.
So it's not like you look at the other person and say that person's bad, right? You just have to understand them for the energy that they are at this time. And we'll do whatever we can to find a balance of that energy. But when you go and you say that person's bad or you put more hate towards those individuals,
right,
you're pouring more negative energy, a lower vibration over to that other side. You're tipping the scale away from your direction when you thought you were doing good. So if people jump on a bandwagon, they're being pretty evangelical about something, or they're
like the Amazon rainforest right now.
Like the Amazon.
We talked about it, but that's been all over Instagram.
So what happens? People get upset.
Our impeachment. Let's do that one. Impeachment with Trump right now.
It's surrounded by all this hate, this negativity, right? So what are you trying to do? Well, you're trying to alleviate someone who you feel has a negative energy that's not doing any good, and now you're compounding that energy, which is shown. So the waveform that you're creating with your emotions and what you say are doubling, quadrupling. You are bifurcating all that energy that's happening on the other side that you didn't want to be there. So when you think you're combating it to do good, you're not doing any good because you're not recognizing the other side for the energy that it is.
Yeah, and then you're basically feeding. Now you've jumped on the bandwagon, even though it's 180 degrees opposite of what the belief is, but that anger that you have is feeding the anger that person is propagating.
That's right. So it's like...
It's giving them more power.
Why? You're not going to put out a fire by putting gasoline on the fire, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Some sort of adjutant. You don't want to keep adding adjutant to it. You want water to it. You want to cool it down. You want to bring it to equilibrium.
Right.
So instead of people think, let's counter it, let's kill it and get rid of it because we don't want it to be there anymore, it's like, no, how do we move it from the far side of negativity of whatever it might be where it is, right? Or how people look at impeachment and just hating Trump because that's what they do right now. How do you bring that back to the center? How do you understand the person for who they are, but find that middle ground?
Without, I mean, because fire is male and water's female.
Right.
So it's bringing that.
It's that equilibrium.
Balance.
Yeah. How do you find the balance between both of them? We don't want the whole world to burn here. And you think, if you go through the impeachment thing, it's like, well, I don't want him to make the world burn. Well, you're just burning things with him at the same time if you're just, jumping and attacking, right?
Yeah, it's all those, angry Facebook posts or, going on Twitter and, calling him an idiot and all that stuff.
You're just compounding that energy, and that's the exact opposite of what you're trying to do, right?
And I heard a great comment this week. Gary Vaynerchuk was talking about this. He goes, social media is not the problem. All social media is revealing what's truly in our hearts.
Yeah. This is what I'm glad you brought that up because I talk about the 2 a.m. YouTube trolls.
Mm-hmm.
People are more likely to tell the truth behind a keyboard when they're anonymous, right?
Yes.
That's why, first of all, guys, that's why Turtle works. Okay, you get paid more for your data because you're remaining anonymous, and typically people tend to be more truthful when they share that data with other people.
Oh, of course.
You see how that works? Mm-hmm. Kind of that incentive. But that's what he's talking about. Social media is not the problem. It's the fact that people feel they can finally express these deeper emotions that they have inside of themselves, and they can do it without repercussion. But what they don't, I don't want to say what they don't understand or what they're ignorant to, is the fact that when you say or think something, not even the action of doing it, the conscious thought, because all of the collective consciousness of everyone on the globe is connected, just by typing those things and having that aggravated thought is it's a negative energy, right? So without even being there or doing anything, what you're doing is you're spreading the one thing that you were trying to stop in the first place. So it's not the social media, it's you and your darker parts that you need to recognize. And you need to find the equilibrium within yourself so that when you go and you're confronted with these energies that you don't agree with, how do you move those energies back into equilibrium with you? And that's through love. That's through understanding. That's through finding that sort of middle ground, that golden middle, right? And it's not to attach yourself to all these different things or distortions or perspectives of how we live our life.
And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Attachments.
Attachments, love.
Yeah.
And we're going to go with a book called do you encourage people to purchase this?
I do. So you shared it with me, right?
Right.
First of all, I had, as you know, I'd never read the Bible.
Right.
Okay. And now you're sharing a book with me that was a Jesuit priest.
Right.
And I do everything I can not to judge it, right? I'm just going to read it. I took your recommendation, I read it, and I loved it. And this man had gone through quite a few travels over in the Himalayas, northern India, places like that, hung out with a lot of gurus, learned a lot about his perspective on life. So he moved from being a Jesuit with certain dogmas, brought that flavor with him for some of the things that actually connected with the philosophies that he actually saw and learned from these gurus on his travels, and then he wrote this book. And so these are his final meditations, his great words about how this man could stand there for 8 hours a day and never stop talking, right? Because he would just continually talk and speak the truth. And when you do that, right, you feel that flow of that energy because you're speaking that higher truth. There's no reason to take a breath.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the book is called The Way to Love, The Last Meditations of, you think is he Italian or?
Anthony De Mello. Yeah, I don't know. Is he Italian?
Anthony De Mello. The book starts off with, and I thought this was really interesting. I love the title of the first chapter. And it's called Profit and Loss. And it has a verse in the Bible, which, like you said, you hadn't read the Bible very much.
Yeah.
I was a pastor, and so that was the main thing that I had studied my whole life.
Yeah.
So this is going to be familiar to me. But in that familiarity, and I encourage people, you need to read the Bible without the scales of religion attached to it.
So, and I think we can get to that post at the far end of this episode.
Perfect.
When we talk about attachments and how we perceive things and the distortions of this world. Because if we're attached to a certain idea, you're never going to be able to read the Bible for what it is. Okay? Not what you think it is.
Right. Or what you have been taught that it is.
Correct.
Let it stand on its own truth.
Yeah.
So Matthew 16:26 says this, "For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his life?"
Yeah.
And that's how he starts the book.
So in this, the first part of the book, and is a nice way he kind of knocked at things here, is a large majority of us are worried about accumulating things. Things, right?
Self.
Feeding that ego. And we find is that we become attached to these things in the material world, right? And we claw and we claw and we claw, and then we realize we've gotten all these things, but we still don't find our happiness. And why haven't we found our happiness? Is because we haven't truly nurtured the things that we needed to nurture, which was our spirit. We didn't recognize the fact that we had our food, we had our shelter, we had our water, and we had our oxygen. We had everything we needed, right? And then the last thing we needed to really focus on was how do we develop internally as a real spiritual being that we are. Now, that's a physical being, right? We evolve naturally. right? Our cells, our genetics, all those other things. But the one part of us that doesn't evolve when we follow the material world, right? Because you've accumulated all these things,
Right.
is the spirit. So if you're going and you're just grabbing these things to make you happy because you think it's going to fill some void in your life, is because you haven't taken the time to focus on that void that's internally inside of you. So you fill them with these outside things, these externalities to then define who you are and how you should feel, rather than you defining for yourself who you are and how you do feel.
And he shares this. He says, remember what you felt like when you had power. You were the boss. People looked up to you, took orders from you, or when you were popular. And he says, contrast that worldly feeling with the feelings of intimacy, companionship. The times you thoroughly enjoyed yourself in the company of a friend or with a group in which there was fun and laughter.
Right. There was no guard. There was no perception of title at that point. It was people who were on a horizontal world, right? Not a vertical one where there's a hierarchy, but everyone was completely equal. So when you sit down and you're sharing a beer, right? Or you're having dinner with a family, or whatever story it might be with friends or some other loved one, there's no judgment that needs to be there, right? That's why the conversations are so much more fruitful. That's why they're so much more loving. That's why there's so much more connection, because there's no idea of title, attachment, right? That material world, that hierarchy that's in place. So when you leave that, things really start to bloom. They start to blossom, and you start to learn a lot more. That's why you always go back to your friends. That's why you always learn so much from one another. That's why you stay connected for so long. It's very rare you find someone that you stay connected to in a workplace.
Right.
Because what you went in there with the titles in place, and most of the time people are like, well, I just do this because I have to do this. It's very difficult to gauge if there's a true friendship. And then all the political shit, if you overstep it, people are like, oh,
That's like...
that could go in a million different ways, and I don't want to dive into it, right? But go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, and this was shocking to me, and I love this part of the book, the parable of life that he talks about. And he said for you to ponder on, and I've been pondering on this since I read this. He said, a group of tourists sits in a bus that is passing through gorgeously beautiful country, lakes and mountains and green fields and rivers. But the shades of the bus are pulled down. They do not have the slightest idea of what lies beyond the windows of the bus. And all the time on the journey is spent in squabbling over who will have the seat of honor in the bus, who will be applauded, who will be well considered, and so they remain till the journey's end.
Correct. What does that mean to you? I know what it means to me.
To me, it's like we've missed the true beauty of everything that is around us, and what's more than, and we talk about the cliff's edge.
Yeah.
All that is out there that's spectacular and universal and timeless, because we're so focused on being in this little bus and then looking at each other in that time frame.
Yeah.
And then those egos sitting there going back and forth for these fake positions that really don't mean anything,
It means
an
nothing.
LLC is not going to mean anything in probably 10,000 years.
No. And if you're sitting, excuse me, if you're sitting at the front of the bus, who gives a damn? Sit at the back of the bus.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. But the thing is, that to me sounds like the saddest journey of life. Let me share with you a story, and there's a reason why that connected with me. I was recently over in Scotland with Amanda and two of my other family members. And we were traveling through the Isles, headed down to the Isle of Iona, right? So you have to go through this larger island called Mull, right? The Hebridean Islands, and then make your way down. But to do that, it's a single-track road, and you have to take a bus.
Right.
I'm so excited to be taking this bus and going on this trip, right? And albeit it is Scotland, and it's gray, and there's fog everywhere, but there is just lush green land and mountains and streams and these big hairy cows that are...
I love those.
They're on every part of... just like every part of every roadside.
I have those in my...
I know you got them in your house.
Yeah. You've seen... I have a problem with cow pictures. I don't
Right.
know why, but...
So, if I look at this, right, and this was my perception of how I viewed things. So, I had to get on this bus to take us down through the island.
Right.
So I can get on my next ferry. So, I had to take one ferry to a bus, and that bus ride took me to another ferry, which took me to my final destination. But on that journey, Mull is a beautiful place. Now, all of the elderly folk... Right? There was very few young people. This is like something you do when you're older. It's like, I got to go back and see Scotland, or people have been watching like Outlander and stuff like that. They're all sitting in the front. Okay, and my family, we took the seats in the back. Everybody in the front falls asleep. And it wasn't necessarily a function of their age, but because the bus driver had said that, well, I apologize for the weather today, you're not going to be able to see much. At that moment, the perspective shut off. The beauty of what was around them was no longer beautiful. So even though the windows were up and there were no blinds, They were completely blind to everything that was happening around them. No one had any interest in seeing the beauty of that entire journey that was going on. They were only interested in getting to that final destination, but not everything that happened in between. So they've missed all these beautiful events, this majesty of Earth that is around you as you're going by. And I am just like, my jaw's like on the floor looking at Scotland, like blows your mind. One of the most gorgeous places I've ever been to. And I think that's why that resonated with me so much. And so not only did I get to my final destination, but the journey there was so enlightening and so beautiful that I'm glad I didn't miss it. And I want to feel like that for the rest of my life. I don't want to be on that bus with the shades drawn fighting for the seat in front just to say I had it or I'm the leader. I don't care about that.
No, because there's a million buses.
There's buses everywhere.
And that bus that you want to get into, you got to the front. Now you got to go get in another bus and get to the front on that one.
Yeah.
And that bus is bigger. And, I mean, where do we get all these perceptions of what's bigger and what's not? And then is that, and that's just what he talks about in the second chapter about happiness.
Yeah.
And he talks about this under the chapter's name is discipleship. And he uses Luke 14:26. He says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children, we've talked about this before, and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And then he asks this question, do you know what causes this unhappiness? You will probably say loneliness or oppression or war or hatred or atheism.
No.
And we would those would be like the top things that we would consider is what's causing unhappiness in the world.
Because you're blaming the external every single time, right? And so he inverts this and he flips it on the head and he says, listen, it's not about these other things going on out here, right? It's what's going on inside of you that needs to be dealt with.
He says there's only one cause of unhappiness.
And it's yourself.
Yes.
You're attached to your family. If your family's in a chaotic disarray or you don't like the household you were brought up in, well, you're the one letting it affect you. It has nothing to do with the family. They've made all their choices. You're going to let other people's emotions determine how you're going to resonate in your own internal happiness.
And he calls it programming, which I love. And he says that it's so strong that you can't even perceive that you are programmed that way.
No, and that's what it is. So remember, even when you went to school when you were younger, kids beating up on you,
right? Kids
making fun of you. Well, it's that kid making me feel bad. That's what everyone taught you. The teacher or a counselor, I don't know, whoever the hell it might be, or your parents. That's the one that did it to you. No, it's not the one that did it to you. It's just no one taught the child to have some logical, rational train of thought so it can deep down see the self-awareness for the happiness and the innocence for what it is, rather than saying that that other person determines how I view my world and how I'm going to live. No. So when it tells you to go hate your mother and your father, don't attach yourselves to those things. Yes, they're family. Yes, they're by blood. Like, we all understand that. We're not telling you to disregard that. But we are telling you to focus on is that your happiness comes from you. You're the one that has to unlock that happiness.
Yes.
You got to get rid of that distortion.
And that's what Jesus is saying in this verse. And I love what he says here. He says, look around and see if you can find a single, genuinely happy person. Fearless, free from insecurities, anxieties, tensions, and worry. He said, you'd be lucky if you found 1 in 100,000. I bet there'd be 1 in a million.
I bet you'd be 1 in a million. Sometimes I walk around and Amanda's like, she looks at me, she's like, why are you smiling? I'm like, I don't even know why I'm smiling. I'm just walking around smiling.
So he says, if that's the odds, then you should be suspicious of the programming.
Doesn't that make sense? You wouldn't go in a casino and put your money on something like that because you already know just from astute observance of everything that's happening, the odds are against me in this.
Yes. And
something about what everybody is following doesn't work, you know? It's so logical and obvious, but we live our lives like we're an ant underground looking up at the sky through an anthole. Your perception of reality is this small, but the sky is so vast you miss all these things. The programming what you know is only to look through the world through that hole.
And to have that separation to say that the sky is different from me or that the ant is different from the sky.
Yeah.
And that universal energy that's out there that's limitless, I can't tap into that because I'm a small ant.
No.
And he says that he goes, and this is really interesting, is if you're not happy, you have been trained to blame yourself, not your programming, not your culture, and inherited ideas and beliefs.
Right. So I'm not going to question anything else. I'm not going to question myself. I'm going to question all that other shit. You know? It's like, it's because no one trained you to say that you're your own worst enemy. You know? Remember we talked about that victim mentality?
Yes.
And the perpetrator?
Yes.
You play both of those roles. You are both sides of that energy. And when we talked about the dictators earlier in the show, you are that energy. That is the darker, deeper parts of you that you need to recognize. And don't judge yourself for it. Just understand that we all share those little bits of it, but some people magnify it to something that looks absolutely horrific.
Right.
Right? But understand it all comes down to you. There's no disconnect between any of these things. No one's any different, right? It just depends on how you want to portray that energy.
Yes, and he says this, it goes right along. He says, what are these false beliefs that block you from unhappiness?
False. F-A-L-S-E. They are false beliefs, right?
My dad used to tell me fear is false evidence appearing real.
That's
an acronym for fear.
I like that.
And I always remembered that, but it's so true. It's false perceptions of the way that this programming that we were trained as like almost like little monkeys.
Remember
to run through, and it's the story of the IBM.
It's
and
terrible.
Monkeys, and eventually one of them will come up with a sentence.
Yeah, and then the other one's writing Shakespeare if you give him enough time, right?
Right.
No, but it's insane. So let's think about this, right? I love my parents, okay? But as they brought me up and into this world, they told me what their idea is of how things worked, okay? So I'm going to absorb that. And then I start applying that perspective of how things work, right? But it took me a long time to realize that they don't have it perfect. And this is going to sound awful, but they're not dead yet.
Mm-mm.
They don't have all the answers.
No.
But they're giving me all the answers to the best they have. But what I realize is that a lot of these answers have those attachments, that unhappiness, that blame for the other,
the fear,
right?
The worry,
the
guilt.
fear, the worry, the guilt. Oh, man, when you get guilt-tripped by your mother, holy crap. I know.
Some of you are out there.
Yeah.
You've lived your whole life and done everything that you possibly can to avoid the guilt from your mom. And you've literally have no perception of who you actually are.
No.
Because you are 40, 50, 60 years old and you're living a lie.
You've embodied that programming.
Yes.
It's never changed.
Right.
You've never questioned it. And it wasn't until I questioned it and that I confronted my mother on it, not in a negative way, but I had a conversation about the truths I found inherently within myself, that the dynamic between both of us changed. It was no longer, it was just, the mother and child. No. This was now self and other self. Having a conversation of energies, right? And ideas.
I love that.
The dynamic changed, right? And if anything, I love my mother more now, right? Because now I have a deeper understanding for what's going on. Now I can understand that perspective because I took her perspective, absorbed it, and then I left it. I took all the good things out of it, and the stuff that didn't work, I left that behind. There's no reason to continue to share and continue to propagate that programming.
Right. Yeah. And when you were truthful with someone that you love.
Yeah.
And they love you back.
It'll sting for a second.
Right.
As my father would like to call it, he likes to call it the hot knife. It goes in slow,
right.
And it doesn't feel good. But man, once you get past the pain of just getting that truth off your chest, the dynamic will change.
Right.
It will never be the same. And that's not in a negative way. That's in a positive way. Because now that person has to respect you for who you are and the choices that you have and your view of the world without judgment, right? And that's the unconditional love you find from a mother or a parent. And that starts to foster. That's something that grows, right? And then relationships start to blossom. And I hope that people take that concept, that story that I just had, and then they apply that to things that they do and everything else in their life.
No, because there's people out there that need to have these conversations.
They have to speak that higher truth.
Well, because you're not going to get past that point of that false programming until, recognizing it's one thing, implementing on it is another.
That's the hardest part.
Right.
Recognizing it, good, you have the self-awareness. But man, to act upon the one thing that you've been doing your entire life and going completely the opposite direction, that's a tough nut to swallow.
That's some balls.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is.
Spiritual balls.
Spiritual, big, high-density spiritual balls.
But I think this moment, speaking of higher density living, of course, he was higher density being.
Oh, this
Mr. Mello, he's passed away. I think.
Yeah, he has, and you can tell just by the way he writes.
But listen to this. This is so higher density.
Please share.
I love this. There is not a single moment in your life when you do not have everything that you need to be happy.
Remember I was saying this? So you're compounding on what I was just talking about.
Oh my God! People need to rewind that and listen to that again.
I put it on repeat. We'll cut the show and I'll repeat it for 30 minutes. Just that one line.
Just meditate on that one line.
Yeah, but you do, right? You have this beautiful, wonderful body, right? You were gifted with existence. You have food. You have shelter for the majority of us. Well, the people listening definitely have shelter, right? You have a means to breathe because you have lungs and clean air, and you have access to water. You have all of these things that create the bliss in life, but what you've done is you thought that they're not in comparison to the material world that you've been just clawing away for, saying that these are the things I need to find happiness. You haven't found your true growth. You find your growth through other things. That's what you've been looking for. That programming doesn't work. And realize it hasn't worked for anybody. Even the people at the top, you realize they're not the happiest, right?
No, and so this is where he's like so good. This is where I love, because he flips it.
This was juicy. I loved reading it.
I know, yeah. And everybody needs to get this book. It's called The Way to Love. He says, think of that for a minute. He's like, think of that.
Just pause.
And he says this: the reason why you're unhappy is because you are focusing on what you do not have rather than on what you have right now.
Right. Remember,
That's so simple.
You asked me.
That's so simple, but so enlightening.
Remember how we were saying, I don't buy any clothes. People just end up giving them to me.
Right.
I don't need anything. I have everything I need. I don't need 40 pairs of pants or a closet full of shoes, Jason.
Yes. Yeah, I'm that way.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, though, I don't know if it's just it's not even a function of my upbringing. I don't know, but I just don't need those things. I don't find my happiness in those areas. I used to think I wanted all of those things,
Right.
and then I realized, man, the road to achieve it and to get all that wealth, to go acquire all that shit, and just have it break down and wither away, there's no good with that. You know, all these things fade, and then I realized, what's something that I can use all the time that's always going to better itself and will not fade away? Well, that's me, right? That's my spirit. So if I enhance my spirit, my appreciation for the things I have all the time, those will never fade.
And that's what's eternal.
Yeah, it's eternal. It will never end up in a junkyard. And once I realized that all that other extraneous shit didn't need to be in my life. I simplified it, right? I'm not like monastically, but I got rid of a lot of this stuff and these visions or these ideas of what I thought I actually needed to define who I was.
That's amazing. And, you know, Jesus had a verse on that. He said, don't focus on the things where moth or rust eat, you know. I mean, because moths would eat clothes, you know, back in the day. I mean, I don't think they want our clothes, our synthetic fibers now.
No, the moth is like, I don't
some
like that.
heavy-duty cotton.
Oh, yeah, you know those nice linen blends,
Yeah.
you know? Kind of
the wool sweaters,
that like raw blend where it's got like almost the darker specks to it.
Yeah, could you imagine where you're from? Like back in the old days, how many had like cedar chests full of sweaters?
Oh, the closets are cedar. You know what I mean? You go in there and just like, do not put a lamp in that closet.
For all our Massachusetts listeners.
Yeah, for all of our fishermen sweaters, you know, up in the Northeast.
So people like bullet points. People like steps 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
So we're gonna hit each of these false beliefs. This false programming.
Don't hit me too.
He kind of does it in a way. I mean, I kind of organize it this way. So we're going to hit each false belief.
Don't hit me too hard.
Happiness is in the future.
Yeah, that's not true.
He says, right here and now you are happy and you do not know it because your false beliefs and your distorted perceptions have got you caught up in fears, anxieties, attachments, conflicts, guilt, and a host of games that you are programmed to play.
Right.
Dude, this is so hard-hitting.
No, I know. It's great. So it's like...
we're just playing this stupid Matrix game.
I can't be happy right now. Why? Because I got all this other shit I'm thinking about that's defining my life that I'm trying to keep up with on how I view things.
And we're looking to the future.
So I gotta wait. When I retire, I can see the world and enjoy things. What the hell? Who told you had to wait to do all this stuff?
Because now you're old, and now you're on a bus in Scotland.
With the blinds down. Yeah, snoozing.
There you are, what you look forward to for your whole fucking life.
Yeah, that's it. You know, you got your fresh oxygen pumping in, but man, that's all you got.
Here's another false belief. Here we go. Happiness will come if you manage to change the situation you're in and the people around you. He said, not true. Yes, exactly. You stupidly, I love this Jesuit priest.
I told you, this guy's brash. Yeah.
You stupidly squander so much energy trying to rearrange the world. If change the world is your vocation in life, go right ahead and change it, but do not harbor the illusion that this is going to make you happy.
No, it's not, right? Because what are you trying to do? You're trying to change the world, right? What does that mean? I got to go do all this external stuff to change it, to suit it to what I think the world should be like.
Right. And the people, what they should be like.
So you're telling me you got to go around and decide that Jason needs to act a certain way?
Or I'm not happy?
Or you're not good enough? Or the world's not good enough? It has nothing to do with that. You got to find your own internal happiness first and understand that that's the real truth. And if everybody can find that, well, guess what? The world's a dandy utopian place and everyone's walking around all giddy with big smiles on, right?
Yeah, and he said, You can stop wasting your energy trying to cure your baldness or build up an attractive body or change your residence or job or community or lifestyle, even your personality. Do you realize that you could change every one of these things and you could have the finest looks and the most charming personality and the most pleasant of surroundings and still be unhappy?
I went to Los Angeles recently. People got flashy. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Los Angeles is flashy.
Oh, at Lambos.
Guess what? Conversations, no depth.
Right.
I talk to strangers all day long. I'm a talker, okay?
Thus we have a podcast.
Nobody looked happy.
No.
They're taking photos and like looking at like it looks like a forced happiness. I'm watching like these people with these, American Express black cards and all this other stuff, like forcing a smile, or they're coming in with like all their shopping bags at this expensive restaurant. But not for one moment, nobody gave a shit about the food.
Mm-mm.
Nobody even ate their food, man.
No.
They were so busy taking pictures of it and trying to define what their lifestyle was to everybody else.
Right.
They couldn't find the happiness in the moment. LA burnt me out.
Yeah, it will.
And I was like, I don't want to be here.
No.
Glad I went, but no thanks.
So we're on page 6.
Yeah.
We've got 40 minutes into this now.
Wait, all right, higher density living book club.
Okay, another false belief. Here's another one.
I'm sweating.
This is like Jeopardy.
Somebody get like a cold pack from my neck.
False beliefs. If all your desires are fulfilled, you will be happy. And he goes, not true. In fact, it is these very desires and attachments that make you tense, frustrated, nervous, insecure, and fearful.
Why? Because, first of all, you're tense because you want to get the desire, right?
Right.
You're grinding your teeth because I got to get there. And then what happens when you get it? I can't let it go anywhere.
Yes.
I'm gonna whisper. I can't let anyone take it. And that's all you're whispering in your head all day long. I gotta protect this thing that I've worked so hard to achieve, right? And then what do? This whole time you thought this thing would make you feel wonderful. You're miserable the whole time you have it.
You can see that with people that...
Does that make sense?
I was listening to somebody the other day, and they're a multi-billionaire.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm literally worried all the time that I'm going to lose it all.
It's nonsense.
Yeah.
Give it all away then.
But he gives a really practical step here, and I encourage people to do this. He says, get a piece of paper and pencil out. And he said, write down a list of everything all the attachments that you're feeling in desires. So attachments and desires, they're intertwined.
It's the same thing, yeah.
Yeah. And he says, say this to them. After you look at them and they're all on paper, deep down in my heart, I know that even after I have got you, I will not get happiness. And he said, ponder on the truths, and then the fulfillment of desires can at the most bring flashes of pleasure and excitement. Don't mistake that for happiness. And I think that's important for us to, and I want you to define that, Alex. Pleasure, excitement, happiness.
So that pleasure, right, that physical experience you receive briefly, that's all it is. It's brief. There's nothing lasting within that. Why? Because that external thing that you received that made you happy for a second, like you're opening a gift on Christmas, what happens the day after on Christmas? Now you got a pile of shit just sitting around. You're like, wow, it was exciting opening it up. But that pleasure was completely temporal. And folks, when I say temporal, what that means is it was bound by time. But the true spirit, your happiness, is something that's not bound by time, right? You're an infinite being, and we'll get into this later and how all the scripts and all the history and everything has told you that you continue to live on forever, right? Conservation energy, second law of thermodynamics, all right? But beyond that small amount of pleasure, that will never last. These material goods that rust and fade away and end up in a junkyard, that will never last. Because what you're receiving from them are both one and the same. They're temporal pieces of things that are only here for a brief amount of time, but the thing that stays, that is true, that you're going to be able to hold on to, that's what's inside of you. So you got to let those attachments go. Thank them for what they were and what you thought you needed from them, and realize that they didn't really need to be in my life.
And this is so beautiful, and he's very poetic when he says this. He says, can you describe light to people who have been sitting in darkness all their lives? Can you describe reality to someone in a dream? Understand your darkness, and it will vanish. Then you will know what light is.
Right.
Understand your nightmare for what it is, and it will stop. Then you will wake up to reality.
Remember we talked about the dream episode? So when we're speaking about dreams, you have to focus on what that nightmare is trying to tell you. Understand those darker energies that are inside of you.
Right.
Understand that archetype, right? Or even before that, you're trying to explain to someone what light is, right? Or, Jason, what does salt taste like? Has anyone ever thought about that? What does salt taste like?
I don't know. I put it on. Now I have to do the pink Himalayan or whatever.
No, I know.
The black salt.
But try and describe the flavor.
Yeah.
You can't. You want to know why? Because the things in life that are truly important are the things that you embody and you feel, right? It's the emotion. Because words, at the end of the day, there's nothing really to them, right? They're a way for us to try and express how we see the world and how we share ideas with people. But if anything, they're the most limiting thing that we have, because we haven't truly learned to understand one another, to feel the emotions of another person, right? Like when you have an empath, or you walk into a room and you feel that energy, or when a group of people are sitting watching a sunset, there's no reason to try and describe it to someone else. You're never going to do the job, right? You're never going to be able to give the same sort of emotional journey and reflection you had internally to describe what that sunset was like. What's important is that you look at the emotion of that moment, the thing that really does last, and that's how we should learn to communicate, is through those things that are lasting, not the things that are temporal and don't last.
I love that. And he gets into speaking of things that are infinite, that last, he gets into the next chapter, and it's called The Extra Mile. And he quotes Matthew 5:40 and 41, and there's a little Jewish history, and I think I've shared this with
I feel like I'm in a pulpit right now.
I love those big, you've got the best pulpits in the world where you're at.
Oh, up in the Northeast?
Oh, yeah, dude, those churches
Guys,
are so beautiful.
He's like up in the air.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Spiral staircase.
Yeah, like, whoa, what are you doing up there, man?
Took a guy a lifetime.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's some phenomenal craftsmanship.
Matthew 5:40-41 says this, and I love this. And if anyone would sue you and take your coat, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. And I shared this with you, and you know this. A Roman soldier could come up to, because the Jews were in captivity at this time, and they could come up to a Jew, and by law, they could ask them to carry their heavy, whether it's be a shield, their weaponry, maybe they were, it'd be like somebody coming up to you and saying, here's all my heavy bags for shopping, carry these for me.
Yeah.
Well, by law, they're required to carry them for 1 mile. And so Jesus came on the scene, and he's like, the way your guys' attitudes are, you're like, I have to do this by law. And then you're just ticked off the whole time that you're carrying this. He goes, what if you looked at that person and said, I'll take an extra mile for you?
And then what's that guy doing? then what he's done, because now you've surpassed the law. And how have you surpassed it? You've touched this man on a spiritual and emotional level to realize the abuse that they're ensuing upon whatever that individual might be, right? That you'll continue to give and give and give regardless of the situation, because you're not going to let the law define you. You're going to let your spirit define who you truly are. And that, in itself, when the people recognize that spirit, right? That consciousness, that beauty, that light that actually exudes from you, is palpable. And that's when a Roman...
an opportunity to serve and learn and teach at that moment.
Yeah, because not only are you learning from them, they're also learning from you as you continue to carry it that extra mile.
Right, and having the proper attitude in doing it.
Yeah, don't be upset about it. Just accept it for what it is.
And so he gets into this, before he gets into the extra mile, he wants to see what is responsible for this programming in our head. And he talks about operating instructions into the computer. And he's like, this is what is fed those operating instructions in the computer.
We feed them. The computer's not typing it up, folks.
He says it's your so-called needs. I love that.
Yeah.
Your values, your tastes, your attitudes. It was your parents, your society, your culture, your religion, and your past experiences. That what was fed into that operating instruction.
Right. Get rid of all that stuff. So it's funny how you, I guess, define yourself if you remove all those things, and then you start to look at yourself, you're like, who am I? Because once you remove all those externalities, you're like, wow, I am absolutely not who I thought I was.
Because all that, and he goes into that, all that is what makes you not peaceful and happy.
No, it disconnects you from people. You fight nature when you do things like that. Well, I'm trying to say it's a function of physics that the consciousness is connected. This is quantum mechanics here, right? And you're fighting the one thing the universe is actually doing, and it does really well. Through this association, through this false programming, these distortions of this world. And when you distort it, right, you're just another step further away from the truth. You're walking on a path in the direction you shouldn't have taken. You're walking further into the desert without water. We should have just sat down and realized I got everything I need. I don't have to go get that thing on the other side of the mountain range.
And he goes into this, and this is what I love. this made sense to me because it's very practical.
I like when things
He said
make sense to
when
you.
other people don't live up to your... It takes a lot. I caught on to that. That's why I love children's books so much.
Yeah.
Illustrations. He said when other people don't live up to your computer's expectations, it torments you with frustration, anger, or bitterness. So when people aren't living up to your expectations, instantly I thought I need to become self-aware enough that when I experience frustration, anger, or bitterness, then I know that programming's running, and now I need to kick that out.
Stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like your trigger. In artificial intelligence, that's a trigger, right? Okay, it's going to stop the rest of the program from running at that point.
But I like that I know the trigger.
Yeah, because you recognized it. So once you begin to recognize, you're like, okay, now that I can recognize, let's take our next reasonable step. That doesn't work. Don't do it. Don't drive into head-on traffic. Why? Because you're going to get yourself killed. It doesn't work, right? Stay on the proper side of the road. Or it's like people like to say, stay in your lane. Yep. Don't tell another person they need to act a certain way. No, just stay in your lane. Be you.
And then he talks about the control freaks that are out there. When things are not under your control, or the future is uncertain, he says the computer insists this. You experience anxiety, tension, and worry.
Yeah.
So if you're experiencing tension, worry, or anxiety, you can sit there and say to yourself, do self-awareness, you can sit there and say to yourself, what am I feeling out of control in?
Yeah. Or why do I feel like I need to be in control?
Right.
Why can't I just recognize, Jason, you have never been in control. You're in a world, right? A society that makes you think you are in control. You're not in control. One tornado will come by, rip your house up. One hurricane. One event. One wrong person. One psychopath to come by and just like shoot you with a handgun or something. You are in no control. So learn to live in the love and the flow of that moment, right? Otherwise, you're just going to be totally depressed because you're not being able to contain what you thought was this very stable world when truly it's chaotic, and that's what you should be embracing.
And that's what he said. He says you're expending all your energy trying to rearrange the world so that the demands of your computer program are met.
Yeah.
Think about that. All the energy that we are expending to try to get this false sense of reality, this matrix of this stupid computer program, it's so liberating when you start thinking about it.
Yeah. You don't really when you exhaust this energy, your body physically becomes darker. The light photons that your body actually emits, your body emits light photons, folks. Look it up. Physics. We'll go into another episode. But you are depleting those stores. Right. So rather than being in the moment, in the now, understanding the flow of that nature and being able to absorb more of those light photons, you expend more than you can, right? You're accumulating all this debt faster than you have resources to actually sustain it, you know, and you become frustrated. And then when you're
photon torpedoes,
there are photon torpedoes, light torpedoes. Yeah, we are out of photon torpedoes, right? So then when you get yourself into a situation where you're like, how am I going to handle this? It's because you've exhausted all of that energy on shit that's totally out of your control. Out of your control. Focus on those three. Out of your control. 4 words. Focus on those 4 things. Out of your control.
Yes.
Say it in your head all day long. I do not control this planet. I do not control other people. It is out of my control. I'm just going to worry about me.
Well, he says it in a more mean way. I like this.
Yeah.
I like it because it's
drop
like,
the hammer.
I was in the Marine Corps, so I like when
no, please do it.
The hammer.
Clearly, I can't fucking do math. So go ahead.
Word too that I love. He says, and so you live a pathetic existence.
It is pathetic.
Constantly at the mercy of things and people.
Yeah, because again, you were defining your world by all these other people and all these other things to say that this is Jason. That's pathetic. Where's your self-worth? What, because you drive an Audi R8, right? Or a Ferrari, you got a huge-ass house with a lot of rooms? Where's the self-worth in that? If I go into, I went to a couple beautiful house parties, right?
Right.
You know, back in the day, I used to be mesmerized, like, oh my God, this house is fabulous. I don't give a shit. I want to go right up to you. I want to talk to these people. I want to understand who they are. I want to know what their journey is, right? That's not pathetic, right? I want to understand the story of what defines those people, not what they own, right? So when you leave all that judgment aside, then your conversation, when you're looking at them, you truly begin to understand those people. And your relationships, man, are they way more fruitful, right? Because you got rid of all that external stuff, and you're not going to let that define how you're going to look and appreciate that person for who they are.
And that's exactly what he gets into in the next part of the book. And Eckhart Tolle talks about this by looking at your ego as the observer, and distancing yourself from it. So, and this is going right along with what he said. He said, you're not going to be able to change your programming all that quickly or perhaps ever. And I think that needs to be clarified.
That's okay.
And you don't even need to.
No, just recognize.
He says, imagine you're in a situation or with the person that you find unpleasant and that you would ordinarily avoid. Now observe how your computer instantly becomes active, insisting that you avoid the situation or try to change it. And if you stay on there and refuse to change the situation, observe how the computer insists that you experience irritation or anxiety or guilt or some other negative emotion. Now keep looking at this unpleasant situation or person until you realize that it isn't them that's causing this negative emotion.
Yeah.
This is a huge relation.
This is great. I got a story for this after this. Go ahead, yeah.
Doing things which are right or wrong, which we talked about earlier, good or bad. It is your computer that is thinking for you. And it insists that you react with a negative emotion towards their different programming.
Yeah. You're not thinking for yourself. So I'm coming down the mountain, right?
Today?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm up there. I left this morning. The stars are out. It's dark, right? It's like 5:50. I get to the bottom, and I start climbing up. Great time. Nobody's out there. Nobody except bears, mountain lions, a bunch of other like dangerous stuff like that. Make my way to the top, and I'm coming down, right? And having a grand old time. The dogs are just loving life. We've had the dogs on the podcast, right?
Yes.
They're on YouTube. Yeah. They got their own
HDL dogs.
Yeah, HDL dogs. They're on. They got their own Instagram.
They can post. We can post other HDL dogs.
Yeah, we can post other HDL dogs. So I'm coming down, right? My dog's not on a leash. I'm in a national forest. Frankly, it's dangerous for me to have the dogs pull me downhill.
Right.
It's better for them to be off leash.
Right.
For my own safety, right? And they're not vicious dogs by any means, right? They're just like
you have a puppy.
Yeah.
And they're smaller dogs.
No, it's great.
I mean, they're not. They're like medium size.
So I'm just like blissed out, like enjoying myself coming down.
Right.
Now I'm rounding probably like the last 2 miles down to the base.
Right.
And there's a woman there with her friend. Friend's albeit quite silent, and the friend's got 2 hiking poles in one hand. But the woman has 2 dogs, okay? And her dog, she's got those choke collars on them, right? She's got a poodle, and she's got a German Schnauzer. My dogs go up to greet the other dogs. She begins to then yank her dogs away, all right, and then kick my dogs. Kick them.
All
right, so hold on a second. I'm not getting upset here, right? So I walk up to her and I'm like, is everything okay? All right? And she's like, no, your dogs are threatening my dogs. I'm like, well, hold on a second. How is it that my animal is threatening your animal? Well, because my dogs are on a leash. Well, if anything in the situation, what's getting upset is the fact that you're limiting the free will of these animals and what they want to do naturally. So, of course, they're going to feel a little bit threatened in the situation.
That's all. Choke collars.
So I told her, I was like, your sense of control in the situation is what's frustrating you, right? This has nothing to do with me. It's the fact that you can't handle the fact that dogs want to do something naturally, right? So your expectation of how things should be are now pissing you off. And her friend's like sitting there like her brain's like fried, right? Because she's like, she's not going to say anything because she knows the other lady's in the wrong. She's kicking my dog, right? So she's frankly like a little embarrassed. But then the lady's like standing there and she's like all dumbfounded. It's like, I'm not upsetting you. You're upsetting yourself. And at that moment, her programming like crippled. It said like big error. Remember the little blue screens? The blue screens on Windows PC?
Yes.
That's what I saw in her eyes, right? And then I just left it. No negative comments, nothing. I was like, enjoy the rest of your day. Like, that was it. And then not in a passive way. I mean, like, seriously, enjoy your hike, right? But realize what you were doing is your own programming pissing you off. There's nothing threatening going on in this situation. It's just how you think the world should operate, and it didn't go your way, that you explode on somebody else.
Yeah, and he says that it's that the reality should be reshaped to conform to the program.
Yeah. And it's the whole situation I had this morning, you know? I don't know. I thought that...
that's true. And it's funny, how many times... This is interesting. This program's playing out over and over again. Literally, 3 or 4 times you guys have gone hiking?
Yeah.
There's been issues or comments...
Right.
...of
every time
with dogs.
People with dogs.
Yeah.
And it's other dog owners too. It's not even people that don't.
Crazy,
it's not even people that don't have dogs. The people that don't have dogs are like, oh my god, your dogs are so cute, and they're like rubbing them and stuff. But the people that do have the dogs, they're like all pissed off. And it's who are you really angry at? Mm-hmm. What are you truly angry about? And when you ask them that, they get even more.
What if the mountain lion wants to come visit you?
Dude, they get even more.
It's not on a leash.
Yeah, it's not on a leash. They get even more pissed off, you know? Don't drop no city ordinance. I mean, I'm in a national forest. I can walk around here nude if I wanted.
Yes.
And it's totally legal.
Yep.
You know? Anyway, that's our parallel for today, folks.
We're walking nude in national forest from here on out. That's higher density.
Yeah, we have plenty of opium over here. I'm just going to be nude drifting into the woods. I have everything I need.
Everything. Next chapter, he talks about he went away sad. And Mark 10:22 says this, and the young man went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Because Jesus, in this story, Jesus had told this very successful young entrepreneur, tech startup guy that he needs to give it all up.
Don't look at me like
Follow
that.
him.
Do not look at me like that.
No. I'm just using that because that's an example.
No, I know, you're right.
And he's like, because he wanted to follow Jesus, and he's like, well, here's what you need to do. You need to give everything up, and then follow me. And he knew, what the circumstance.
He understood.
Right.
But for a lot of us today, even listeners, it's tough for people to do that, to give up what you thought was you. It's almost like it's this false identity, right? It's like, how do you relinquish what you've been holding on to for so tight for so long? It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and he even goes into people can't handle the whole part of having to question the belief even of spirituality or God.
They can't, Jason, they can't even get to that point.
Right.
Before you can look at the spiritual side of yourself, you can't even realize the true self first, right? You can't even start to grow the real you because you're so worried about dealing with the false you. That's the thing. So all these other beautiful things that you miss, the divine intelligence, whatever it is, I don't care how you view it or believe it, something created this, some sort of energy, right? That we're living in this world, you can't even begin to appreciate that because you're so focused on the falseness of what you think is reality.
Yeah, and you can almost, and we can play it out with this lady today. She went instantly. She was trying to defend herself. But he says this. He says, "You'll live a life." Think about this lady when you said this. I think it's a great story. A life of frustration, anxiety, worry, insecurity, suspense, and tension. Did she not experience all of those?
All those things in 30 seconds of her trying to kick my dog, right? And then the animals feel that energy, and then her friend feels that energy, and she's embarrassed because this other lady believes this is how the world is, and she's ruining her own morning through her own programming. It's like, look at how majestic the scenery is around us, and you're trying to kick an animal. You know what I mean? Because you're worried about how your dog is going to interact. Just let the dogs be dogs.
Let them be dogs. And we're going to end this week in suspense based off the dogs. We're going to end it with one more little statement that he hits hard as a hammer, and we're on page 17.
I love when we drop hammers.
And he says this. No, this is the De Mello hammer.
Yeah.
And here's something else to ponder. Each time you are anxious and afraid, it is because you may lose or fail to get the object of your attachment. And that's what we're going to talk about next week.
Thank you.
And let's talk about our sponsors real quick.
Yeah, sponsors. And again, this episode was brought to you by Tartle, tartle.co, Tartle. What's your data worth? The only anonymous exchange that allows you to get paid for all the information you create while you're online. And all of us are online, so start getting paid for it.
And Rigby Digital, which helps medium to small businesses with beautiful website design.
Nice job.
Snapchat ads, Instagram ads, and Facebook. If you need help with that, please don't hesitate to go to rigbydigital.com. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Jason.